Welcome to Disease Identification. This is for our 4-H forestry judging. And here is a website for you to use, a forest pest website that is
Let's start
really
going
good for
through our
pictures and
diseases,
to help you
and the first ones we'll
study at
talk
home
about
is artist conch, and this can be on any of our trees. It's a decaying fungus, which means as the tree is dying, this is helping to break down the tree into smaller pieces that can be decomposed or reused in the forest. And you're looking for this large kind of plate shaped here. It's almost kind of like an artist palette, like if you're an artist who paints. The upper surface is going to be this dark brownish tan color with white underneath, kind of a leathery, real tough. As it dries out, it's going to be almost woody to the touch. These can be quite large. I mean, small as your hand or as large or bigger than a piece of paper. The next one is something that you've all seen. We've all seen lichens, and pretty much lichens will get on anything that is not moving. And so this is a combination of a fungi and an algae that are working together, and they're not parasitic to the tree. They're just kind of hanging out, doing their own thing. But lichens will be one that you may see out in the forest. We're going to start talking about ones that affect our hardwood trees or deciduous trees. Remember, those are the ones where they lose their leaves in the fall. And this one is called black knot. Black knot is a fungus. It's very common on cherry. If you look at this one right here, you're noticing the white marks on the young cherry tree. The fungus gets on here, and we affectionately call this poop on a stick. It kind of looks like bear poop there that's kind of been stuck on the tree. And it's not fatal to the tree, but it does kind of have an unsightly appearance. And so this fungus causes this large mass to grow on the tree. Usually on the twigs. It can be as big as some of the branches, but usually on some of the smaller twigs. This one has an interesting shape to it, and it's the most common canker disease of hardwoods. It's called Nectria canker. Notice that Nectria is capitalized here. That's a proper noun. And it's very common on most of our trees that we have in our contest. And what happens is the fungus enters the tree through a wound or an injury, and the fungus gets in there, and as the tree tries to heal itself, it produces these callus rings. And over many, many years, as the tree keeps trying to heal and kind of repair from this, it turns into this huge target. So it kind of is like a target, like if you're a shooting target. And this doesn't kill the tree completely, but it is very damaging. And if this goes all the way through to the other side and has multiple cankers, it can kill the tree eventually. All right, our next one is called hypoxylon canker. And this is also caused by a fungus. And the fungus, what it does is it gets underneath the bark, and as it's growing and producing its fruiting structures, the structures that will produce the spores to make more fungus, they push the bark off. So if you look at this gray area in here, then the bark is been pushed away, pushed off of this tree. It's almost like it's behind it, and it just really tries to get the bark off of there. You can see on this example the bark is missing as well. So hypoxylon canker, don't confuse it with lichens. Lichens are on top of the bark. Hypoxylon canker, the bark is missing. This is chestnut blight. And due to this fungus, there are no longer any American chestnuts found around. You may find a few that are trying to be replenished in some areas. If you see chestnuts out, they're going to be a Chinese chestnut, not a true American chestnut. These yellow to orangish structures here are the fungus fruiting bodies. That's where they're producing their spores. As the fungus gets on the tree and gets heavily infected, the canker or the injury, the sore from the fungus, appears to be sunken in. It's almost like if you've baked a cake and the cake falls and has the cracks in it, and it's going to have these large cracks. So it's like if you pushed on it, you could push the bark into the tree. If you, in the contest, you may have something like this, where you've got this piece of bark laying there with the orange and yellow kind of fungal structures on there. You may have the chestnut burr with it, kind of like a little porcupine bird's nest looking thing with the sample as well. All right, this one you should be looking at it and knowing what tree it is. It's an oak tree. And so this is oak wilt. And our red oaks are more affected. Remember, our red oaks have the bristle tips, are usually more affected, more severely than our white oaks, but it does affect both of them. It causes a fungus that causes this browning or wilting of the leaves, and it can cause it to lose its leaves before fall. And if it gets bad enough, it will spread throughout the tree and it can kill the tree. Insects are the main reason. It carries the spores from tree to tree and infects it. Dutch elm disease. Notice our capitalization here with Dutch. This is a disease that affects our elm trees and is caused by a little insect that carries the fungus from tree to tree. You're not going to see the true fungus on here, but you're going to see the symptoms. And so you may have wilting or browning of the leaves. And then if you look underneath the bark into the wood, you're going to see some discoloration. You're going to see kind of a brownish purple color. And the fungus, it gets in here, and we know that trees have different structures that carry the food and water up and down the tree. And in those structures, these fungus clogs up, if you want to think about it, clogs up the plumbing of the tree. So it gets this dark streaking in here that you can see here. If you have a sample in the contest, they'll have the bark peeled back on it, and you'll be able to see these little dots and stuff. And it clogs up the plumbing, and so the tree can't carry food and water from the leaves to the roots, and so the tree can die from Dutch elm disease. Beech bark disease, we're not going to talk a whole lot about it. We don't have it very often in the contest. These little things are super magnified scale insects, and they carry a little fungus when they travel from the trees. And as the tree gets affected, it has these little pock or scar marks on it. Okay, if you look at this one, you should notice exactly what tree it is. We've got smooth leaves with parallel veins, so we know that's a flowering dogwood. And so this is dogwood anthracnose. And this is a fungus that happens a lot when we have moist, warmer, a lot of water, a lot of rain going on. And we're looking at these little kind of like a target spot. We've got the brown and then the purple margins, and that tissue is dying on that leaf. And so you're looking for those little dying brown marks. If it gets really bad, it can, take over the whole leaf. But we're looking for these tan spots with the purple margins. All right, now we have white trunk rot of birch. And we know it's a birch tree because of the kind of whitish, papery bark here. And so what's going on is we know the trunk's rotting. We get that. But this black structure is not the fungus itself. The fungus is underneath here. It gets in the tree through a wound or an injury. So if you have a cut into a tree, it can get the fungus in there. And the fungus produces this thing called a clinker, or this wedge. So basically, this wedges open that injury, and the fungus can keep getting in there and growing behind there. And you may want to think about it like this is like you picking off a scab, and your hand or whatever keeps getting infected because you keep picking off the scab because it keeps that injury open. So that's what this black structure does. It serves as a wedge to open that injury, and more fungus can get in there, and eventually it's going to rot out our birch tree. Okay, let's look at some of our diseases that affect our conifer trees, our ones that produce cones. This one is going to be called needle cast. And this is common of a lot of our pine trees, our eastern white pine, our loblolly, and our Virginia pine. And the needles turn this yellowish brown color. And then the fungus is the little small black spots on the leaves. If we look at the tree itself, it's going to have this kind of scorched or burnt appearance through the needles. And that's as it gets more and more of the fungus into it. This one I'm going to show you, but we're not going to talk about it much. It's called brown spot needle blight. And in the south, this affects one of the trees that we do not have on our list. The needles themselves, instead of being the yellowish, they have these rusty spots. And the spore areas are these brown, gray-green color on here. It's a little bit different, but we typically don't have this one in the contest, so you don't have to study it as much. Okay, this one is called cedar apple rust, and this is one you definitely need to know. The cedar tree, remember that's our trees that have the scales, is the host. And you have this little brown gall that's on there, kind of like a little prune, little brain, if you want to think about it that way. Before it turns brown, it looks like this lower picture where it's orange. It's almost like a pumpkin turned inside out. It's a long orange tendrils, kind of juicy. They're producing the spores. And so it doesn't hurt the cedar tree, it just makes it look bad. So as the spores get released, then over here on the right hand side you have the apple leaf. And the fungus gets on here and produces these yellow spots, and it really, can affect the leaf quality. It can produce spots on the apples, and so you don't have a lot of good quality apples that you can pick and sell. And this is for mainly, our kind of our ornamental apple trees we have in our yards. It can affect orchards as well. It usually doesn't kill the tree, but if it gets bad enough, it can. Okay, let's talk about fusiform rust. Here we also have a host to victim relationship, if you want to think about it that way. This is an oak leaf, and on the back side you see these little orange structures. Those are our fungus producing structures that produce our spores. And then the spores affect our pine trees, mainly on our main branches or the main stems of the pine tree, and it produces this spindle, kind of this oblong shape, kind of bows out a little bit. And this fungus gets in there and kind of swells up the tree and produces a spindle-shaped gall. And it can have this orangish yellow appearance to it, and that's our fungus fruiting structures in there as well. Okay, now we have red heart. Red heart is kind of interesting. It produces a conch, much like an artist conch, but they're more hoof-shaped. So if you think about horse hooves or cow hooves, kind of has that shape to it. This fungus often gets into the heartwood, so red heart kind of makes sense. And it gets in there and clogs up and eventually rots out the inner structure of that tree. And right here you can see where the conchs have been on the outside as well. Here in relation you can see the conchs going all the way up to their little person standing there. But what it's doing is the fungus is rotting out the inside the heartwood of the tree. Anosis root rot. So the name kind of tells you what's going on. It's going to rot the roots of the tree. So it kind of produces these conchs. It's a fungus once again. Produces these conchs. And those may be at a live tree. And as the fungus gets in there, the infected roots start having this stringy appearance. I'm going to use that pumpkin reference, kind of this when you pull the strings out of the center of a pumpkin. And sometimes you won't see these because they're going to be covered in all the litter at the forest, the needles, the fallen branches and other things. But if you dig down, you're going to see these stringy roots and kind of this orangey pumpkin color going on there. Alright, this one is called dwarf mistletoe. This is a parasite, so it is using this plant for food and nutrients. And these little things right here are the dwarf mistletoe. Something kind of cool about this is when it gets ready to release its seed, it produces by seed. They are expelled kind of like a little shot. So they can be kind of like a missile, if you want to think about it that way, shot across. And they stick, so they could be stuck to the other branches. They could be picked up by birds or animals. And they cause the branches to swell and kind of witch broom out. If you've ever seen when a tree's been topped and it doesn't grow back on the top as well, it kind of causes a lot of wispy little branches to grow above it. And our last one we're going to look at is called white pine blister rust. And looking at these pictures, we know it's a white pine because we see the whorls here. We know that white pines produce those wagon wheel whorls. And this is a fungus, and one of the most serious ones to affect our eastern white pine. It has a host on a different plant that's in the ribes family, gooseberries and currants. And they produce the spores from those fungal structures, and then the tree gets infected. The bark can turn this yellow-orange color. The stem can swell and have blisters, and then they release the spores and kind of just repeats that cycle all over again. But we know it's, if you see a piece of bark laying there, or a trunk laying there that has the whorls, we're going to know it's white pine blister rust. So use this video to review our diseases and keep studying for our regional contest.